tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
After a week away on holiday with his own family, they were traveling home in their little car. A truck driver was rushing home to be with his family and managed in one maneuver to destroy all that Richard Forrest held dear. His wife and 3 children all slept, and Richard watched over them intensely, giving him joy as he entered the last roundabout before the long straight back to Riverburn. This was the last he knew of anything of his old, happy life. How he had wished he had joined them and gone to sleep. Richard Forrest woke in a hospital bed, only able to open one eye. His left arm was elevated and in a cast, as was his right foot. As he started coming around and realizing what must have happened, he first felt the burning sensation, like his skin had been slashed 1,000 times all over his body. He heard screaming, blood-curdling, muffled screaming, until he realized it was he himself who was screaming. Nurses and doctors all rushed in, removing bandaging and breathing tubes that ripped his throat as they were pulled out, forcing his speech into guttural tones.
Family! Where's my family? Where's my wife? Are they safe?
Mr. Forrest, please, you must calm down. You're in the hospital and have been in a coma for 6 weeks. Now please, calm down, and the doctor will explain everything.
A nurse pleaded with him.
Now, Mr. Forrest, I will try to explain this the best I can. Are you in any pain? Would you like some relief?
A doctor asked.
No trucks! Just tell me where they are!
His new, deep, monstrous voice did not feel like his own.
Okay now, please, remain calm. I'm Dr. Atkinson. You, Mr. Forrest, were in a terrible accident 6 weeks ago and have been in an induced coma ever since. Your right lower leg is broken, along with your left arm, which we rebuilt as best as possible. You have extensive scarring and burns across your whole body. It's a miracle you survived.
What happened? Where's my family, doctor?
He could not get used to this new voice he heard from his own mouth.
A truck collided with your car. Now, Mr. Forrest, I'm afraid your family did not make it. There's no easy way to put it. You're the only survivor of the accident, except for the truck driver, who thankfully only had minor injuries and is now awaiting a court date.
The bright white lights of the hospital seemed to dim, and Richard heard that horrific guttural scream once more as he fell unconscious.
Not yet.
He heard his wife's voice whisper to him. He sat up like a shot, hoping it was just one big nightmare. He sat up, and it was the hospital bed he sat up from. The emotions of what happened burned across the wounds of his body. His arm and leg were no longer elevated. He could feel the scars underneath bandages across his body. He could open both eyes now. However, the one that was covered before felt odd, as if it was not open properly. A nurse came rushing in.
Mr. Forrest, it's okay. You're still in the hospital. Do you remember when we spoke before?
Yes, I remember. Is it really true that my family is gone?
His voice still sounded foreign to him, not his own.
I'm afraid so, Mr. Forrest. If it's of any solace to you, they died in their sleep upon impact with the truck. The truck driver was devastated about what he had done and held his hand up. His trial is in a few weeks.
The nurse informed him. Tears filled Richard's eyes, and the scars burned once more. The nurse consoled him as best she could, but as she put her hand on his shoulder, He could feel her touch burn across his skin. He embraced the pain. It felt natural. He wrapped his arms around her and could not let go. It was as if the burning feeling of his wounds would somehow awaken him from this nightmare. It did not. He slept that night, a tortured sleep of driving and crashing, of his family with no emotion upon them, broken and snapping into impossible contortions as he relived the crash over and over again. As he tried, in the dream, to pull himself and his family from the wreck, his wife reached out to him. Her touch gave him the same burning feeling upon his skin, and she reached her face closer and whispered,
Not yet.
As he woke, Dr. Atkinson walked in.
Now, Mr. Forrest, today the nurse will change your dressings and we'll look at getting you discharged. I'm sure you'll want to see your family and get your head around things. I will prescribe you some powerful pain relief and make some appointments for your local GP, and we'll go from there. Again, I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Forrest.
Richard sat in silence. The nurses came within the hour. Richard had not moved or spoken as they changed his dressings into more manageable sutors and steri-strips. He embraced every painful touch, every burning sensation. All the knife-like shrieks and shocks of contact that coursed through his body as they moved and manipulated his joints. The nurses kept asking if he was well. He replied with a positive grunt, trying to focus on the pain. Before they left, the nurse he had recognized from before explained his brother was on the way to pick him up. Richard nodded and went back to his silent contemplation. After about an hour, Richard thought but was unsure of the time. In walked his brother Jerry, clearly devastated. He embraced his brother. Richard still felt the burn of his scars, but he didn't care. He was becoming accustomed to the pain now.
I'm so sorry, Rich.
Was all that Jerry could manage before breaking down. The nurses helped Richard into a wheelchair, which he refused, and stood up on struggling and strained legs. But the burn he felt as his limbs were shocked into the movement was like heaven to him. The pain made him push more, made him feel closer to those he had lost. Each step, filled with a burning flame, wrecked his senses. Each step is like an old cripple using his brother for stability. They got to Jerry's car and drove home in silence. They got to the roundabout, and Richard saw the number of flowers, wreaths, and cards laid for him and his family. He instructed his brother to stop. They did. Richard spent some time reading every single card, note, and letter. The emotion filled him, and he felt the fire in his wounds again.
Ready, Rich?
His brother asked sheepishly.
Yes. Take me home, please, Jerry.
They drove to Richard's house in silence, and before he drove away, Jerry said,
When you're ready, just phone me, Rich. I'll come around later to check up on you.
Okay, Jerry. Just give me some time to get my head round things.
Richard laid heavy eyes upon his little house, once filled with noise, laughter, and love, to be now greeted with absolute silence. The little picket fence and garden that once seemed to have so much life and character at the front of his house now just stood as if in a museum. He opened the red front door and hung his keys on the latch. As he walked down the hall towards the kitchen, floods of memories attacked his brain. The door to his living room was slightly ajar, and he remembered his youngest using the coffee table to stand up for the first time. He looked up the stairs and remembered his daughter coming down, all dressed up for her first school dance. He entered the kitchen, which used to be the main room his family frequented. He remembered his middle child coming in with a cut on his knee and sitting with him on the countertop to kiss it better and put on a plaster. Then he looked at the kettle, and he could hear his wife.
Fancy a brew, love?
But now there was nothing. Only memories haunt him. It became too much. He burst into tears, crippled by the hurt. He crumpled into a pile on the floor and wailed. such sorrow filling his lungs. In his despair, he heard her again, his wife's voice.
Not yet.
Unsure of how long he had lain upon the kitchen floor, he drove himself to stand, willing to move again. He made himself a cup of coffee, forced himself to the back door to have a cigarette. He sat on the step, smoking away and sipping his coffee, surveying his back garden. Streams of tear-filled memories hurt 10 times more than any physical pain he had registered. He put out his cigarette and headed back inside. Once inside, he headed upstairs. The smiles and faces on photographs hung on the walls seemed to taunt and beckon him simultaneously. He came to his 2 sons' rooms that they had shared. In it, saw their bunk beds. He grabbed their pillows and teddy bears and held them tight, breathing in their smell, trying to feel them once more. He laid them back, patting each pillow as he moved from the room, closing the bedroom door. He walked down the hall to his daughter's room, looking at the sign which hung upon it. All flowers and fairies. He opened the door and could almost picture her lying on her bed. He went and sat at the foot, as he always did when saying goodnight. He lifted her pillow, breathing deeply, trying to inhale the last traces of her. He patted the pillow as he left the room. He moved into the main bedroom his wife and he had shared. This was difficult. He had to steel himself away from not entering. He forced himself through the threshold. He lay upon the bed and gripped her pillow tight against himself until his hands hurt. And he held on. He gripped tighter on the pillow and felt his emotions take him once more. Flashbacks of everything they had put in, a lifetime of hopes and dreams, love and hate, fight and argument, kisses and cuddles. The day they were married, the meals they had shared, how beautiful he thought she was whenever he would steal glances of her. Never to happen again. Nightmarish images of the blank faces contorted his mind once more, reliving that same event over and over. The crash, the roll, the horrific scene. The sky is picturesque with one cloud, his wife's smiling face popping in.
Not yet.
She smiled at him. He woke up almost smiling. This hurt his face, and he realized he hadn't even checked his own wounds. Concentrating more on the family that had been ripped from him, he moved toward the bathroom. It was dark in the bathroom. He wondered what time it was. He stared at the mirror, at the silhouette of his face. He couldn't quite make out the features in the dark. He pulled on the light switch. He didn't recognize himself. The visage did not seem real. Stitches and steri strips crisscrossed one side of his whole face. Cuts and scrapes adorned the other side. His eyes were bloodshot. One he could barely keep open. A large scar was running down one side of his lip and further down his throat, only flesh knitting it together. He removed his t-shirt. He looked like a patchwork tapestry with large scars. Deep gashes across his body, up and down both arms, wrecked and ruined. He stood a while inspecting each one, running his fingers over them, feeling each imperfection. This did not feel like his own. His skin felt false to him. He felt that familiar burn that rose from every sinew, every fiber of his being. He felt all the scars and cuts inflamed with anger, and he could almost feel actual steam rising from each of them. He thought of the truck driver who had created this monster and taken his life away. A noise downstairs. The door. Jerry said he was coming round.
Relax. Put your t-shirt back on. Go see him. He's worried.
A voice in Richard's head spoke to him.
Rich, it's only me, mate. Just seeing if you're all right. Brought a pizza and a couple of beers.
Yeah, I'll be down now.
Richard headed down the stairs while his brother was in the kitchen, handing him a beer.
Get that down, you bro. Sure, you deserve it after everything. I can't imagine what you must be... Here.
He couldn't finish his sentence. He handed the beer with one hand and grabbed the other for a tight embrace.
We'll be alright, mate, okay? We are all here for you. Whatever you need to get through, okay? Anything.
Jerry choked back tears.
I'm in turmoil, Jer. Honestly, I don't know whether I'm coming or going anymore. My voice has changed. My skin doesn't feel right. All these cuts and wounds burn every time I sleep. I relive everything. She tells me, not yet. I don't know what she means, but she's not here. She's gone, mate. She's gone. They're all gone. And I'm left. Not even myself. This thing is left in my place. I don't know what it is. What I am without them. What will I do, mate? Where do I go? What's the point?
I don't have the answers, mate. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish there was something I could do. All I can offer is that fucking maniac of a driver will be going down for a time in a couple weeks. A long time, I'd say. That'll serve the bitch right.
Richard could see his brother's point in trying to console him, but that didn't seem enough. Time inside didn't seem to Richard to be adequate punishment for all he had done, all he had caused, the lives he had taken. Richard thought to put a face to the demon who had wrecked his life.
Who is he, anyway?
Just some bloke, Rich. He lives a couple of villages over. Apparently, he was rushing to get home after a week of driving down south or something. Fucking maniac had a family and everything himself.
I want a name, Jerry. I want to inflict all this pain upon him. I want him to feel how I feel. I want to take all his heart and crush it. I want to destroy him as he has me. That would be righteous justice. That would be vengeance. That maybe is why I'm still holding on to this existence. To see this out and visit this man.
The words came from somewhere dark, deep inside of Richard. An evil, ominous realization filled him to his core. That was it. That's why he had lived to visit the same destruction upon this man that had taken everything and ripped it away.
I understand your feelings, Rich. I felt exactly the same. When I first heard, I went through the roof. Found his address, where he worked, where he went, and where he shopped. I was gonna take him out. But Denise stopped me. It's in the police's hands now. It's with the law, she said, and I slowly came round to it. I'd still like to see him, though. Should we drive around? We don't have to confront him, we can just look. I don't want you throwing everything away on this piece of garbage, Rich. You'll see him, just some idiot. Come on, I'll drive.
His brother insisted, and Rich followed. Jerry had not lied. It was only a couple miles from Riverburn as they approached some back alley. Jerry pointed out a house. There he was. Some fat, bald-headed, bearded, average-looking, typical truck driver. Not some evil demon, as Richard pictured. Not some devil hell-bent on destruction. An average, everyday bloke with a typical family. Wife, 3 kids, 2 young boys, and an older girl. No different to Richard himself. Only it was different. Now, Richard had no one. They'd been taken. He himself had been taken. He stared at this man who had stolen his life, had taken everything from him. He felt the rage burn inside himself. He burst out of the car.
Rich, no, stop!
Jerry jumped out and grabbed his brother. Jerry struggled against his brother's forcefulness. He had to literally drag Richard to a halt, who now resembled more of a feral beast snarling, closing in on a hunt, ready to visit vengeance upon this house.
Richard, stop! please, get back in the car!
Jerry shouted at Richard. Richard could not stop himself. The truck driver had heard the commotion and was at the door.
Oi, what's going on here? I've got 2 kids in the house trying to have their teas.
The driver shouted unknowingly.
You fucking what?
Richard went from feral beast to uncontrollable monster. He launched his brother out of the way, sprinted at the door, launching himself over the fence. He hurtled toward the truck driver, writhed him from his doorstep, and lay so much fury against the man that it was as if Richard had become possessed by anger. Fist upon fist, blow after blow, unleashing all that had been buried, everything that was left. Hopes, dreams, happiness, sadness, anger, savage, anger. All were focused and inflicted into this one moment. He gripped and swung his fist until he could not feel anything. The driver went limp. But then Richard heard the wails of the family that had now come to the door. The terrified shrieks of the young boys and the girl broke Richard from his prey, and he heard his wife once more.
Stop! Not yet!
Richard was holding the driver by his collar, almost lifeless. But with his wife's words, he dropped the man and took off. Richard ran in whatever direction he could. He ran, and it burned. He ran through fire and through brimstone, heartache and loss. He kept running, until the roads gave way to footpaths and fields, through farm tracks and woodlands. It burned. He ran. It burned more. He ran faster. He must have covered miles away from the village. He pelted up a steep hill, which drained the very last of his energy. He forced a guttural roar once he reached the top. Every ounce of every little piece he had left was pushed into that noise. He collapsed to one knee and sat back. He surveyed where he was. He was atop a hill overlooking the village. He could also see Riverburn in the distance, and in the darkness he sat in. The blood of his vengeance upon his fists and his own clothing, the fires of his soul were dying down. He felt peace wash over him. Before he could rest, his wife visited him once more.
Fancy a brew, love? I'll get the cups out. You stick the kettle on.
She smiled, and all seemed right with the world.
Chilling tales for dark nights.